Let me tell you something strange. If an idea truly made the average person powerful, you probably wouldn't hear about it on television. You wouldn't learn it in school, and politicians definitely wouldn't promote it. Because power follows a simple rule. It never creates more competition than it has to. Think about that for a second. If something truly made people independent, wealthy, and impossible to control, why would the system promote it? It wouldn't. And that's the first truth most people never realize. There is an invisible boundary around what society is allowed to think. Step outside that boundary, and suddenly you're dangerous. Step back inside it, and suddenly you're reasonable again. That boundary has a name. The Overton window. It decides which conversations are allowed, and which ones must never happen. Not because they're wrong, but because they threaten the structure of power. 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli wrote something brutally honest. He said rulers don't maintain power through force alone. Force creates resistance, but control of perception creates obedience. If you can shape what people believe is moral, what they believe is dangerous, and what they believe is impossible, then people will enforce the system on themselves. No chains required. Look at the modern world. People argue all day about politics. Left versus right. Liberal versus conservative. But notice something strange. The arguments always happen inside a very narrow corridor. You're allowed to debate policies. You're allowed to debate personalities, but questioning the entire structure of power itself. That conversation almost never happens. Because once people start asking deeper questions, the illusion becomes fragile. Questions like, why do most people work 40 years, yet never truly own their time? Why are the smartest students trained to become employees instead of builders? Why is lifelong debt considered responsible, but financial independence treated like a fantasy? This is where people like Andrew Tate say something that shocks people. He says the system isn't broken. It's working exactly how it was designed. Schools create workers, banks create borrowers, governments create rules, and media creates narratives, each piece reinforcing the other. Not through conspiracy, but through incentives. Most systems don't need to force people to obey. They simply shape the environment. If you want people to stay in one place, you don't build a prison. You build a comfortable cage, with entertainment, with distractions, with just enough opportunity that leaving the system feels dangerous. That's why money is such a strange subject. Everyone wants it, everyone works for it, but very few people actually understand it. Money is not just paper. It's not just numbers on a screen. Money is stored power. It is the ability to move resources, influence decisions, and bend reality slightly in your direction. That's why the richest people rarely chase money directly. They chase control of systems, companies, platforms, infrastructure. Because once you control the system, money flows automatically. Patrick Bet-David explains this perfectly. He says the biggest difference between employees and entrepreneurs is simple. Employees think about income. Entrepreneurs think about leverage. Leverage means building something that works even when you're not there. A company, a brand, a network, a machine that multiplies effort. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people never reach that level. Not because they're stupid, not because they're lazy, but because the system rewards predictability. And real power requires something dangerous: independent thinking. And once you start thinking independently, you begin to see patterns everywhere. Why the same financial cycles repeat. Why crises often produce new rules. Why control quietly becomes more centralized over time. And suddenly you realize something unsettling. The real battlefield isn't politics. It isn't money. It's perception. Control perception, and you control the direction society moves. Lose control of perception, and even the strongest empire collapses. The world is not divided between rich and poor, or left and right. The real divide is simpler. People who understand how the game works, and people who are still playing by rules they never questioned. Because once you see the system clearly, you stop asking for permission. You stop waiting for opportunity. You start building leverage. And that's when something interesting happens. You stop being a piece on the board and start thinking like the player.